The wind clawed at the thatch of the longhouse like a wolf denied its meal, moaning through the cracks in the timber as the fire within died to embers. Smoke hung low under the sagging roof, and the stink of sweat, pine tar, and old blood pressed against the skin like a shroud. Around the hearth, warriors gathered in silence, their faces lit by the dim flicker of dying flame, rough with frost-beaded beards and shadow. At the center sat the skald, his breath a pale mist before him, his face ravaged by age and battle. One eye had long since been swallowed by war, and the other stared into nothing, clouded and rimmed with red. His hand trembled as it clutched the haft of an antler cane, carved with serpents winding into one another's mouths. His voice, when it came, was low and brittle, each word like an iron nail driven into the longhouse floor. "You think you know what it is to sleep," the skald rasped, as if speaking to ghosts rather than men. "But true sleep is a blade, not a bomb. The old ways, before the god tongues came from the south, before even the runes were carved into stone, our ancestors knew of it. A deathless slumber, a waiting blade drawn not from sheath, but from soul." No one interrupted him. They knew the old man spoke of things half lost, things their grandfathers muttered in drink, and their mothers feared to name beneath the stars. The door creaked as the storm outside surged, snow hissing like whispers over the roof. Somewhere a hound barked and was cut short. They called it the dromersify. The skald went on, breath shallower now. The war sleep. It was not rest. It was not healing. It was crossing. Crossing into a place where the soul walks ahead of the flesh. Berserkers they were, but not like those you've seen scream and tear at shields with foam-flecked jaws. These, they were still. Still as the dead, their hearts slowing to a drumbeat you cannot hear unless your spirit leans out of your mouth. A warrior spat into the fire, the hiss loud in the silence. Another leaned forward, face shadowed beneath a hood of fur. "And where did these berserkers go, skald?" he asked, voice rough and cold. "I've fought in 6 winters of blood. I've seen no such sleep. Only axes, only fire." The skald turned his ruined eye toward the speaker. "You've not seen them because they are gone. Lost to time, to fear, and to silence. But they were real. I saw one once, in the frost years of my youth. When the sun would not rise and the sea froze in its cradle. He was carried into the village like a corpse, wrapped in boar hide and sacred ash. No breath misted from his lips. No blink came to his eye. But when we buried him, for we thought him dead, he rose from the barrow on the 3rd night. Naked. Cold. And humming a song that cracked the stones beneath our feet. Outside, thunder rolled, a low groan from the bowels of the world. The warriors stirred uneasily. One crossed himself. Another touched the amulet at his chest, Thor's hammer, blackened with time. The skald laughed once, a dry, barking thing. "You do not believe. But it matters not. You need only to listen, for I have little breath left. And when my heart ceases, my tongue will be taken by hell, and my tail with it." He leaned forward. The fire lit his face like a skull's. His voice lowered until it barely crossed the space between them. "They would sleep in the roots of the world, beneath stone and song. They carved the Dromsrunner, sleep runes, into their flesh, into their blades. A secret known only to a few. And when battle called, they did not charge. No. They lay down, eyes closed, hearts slowed. They crossed the veil as dreams and walked before their enemies. Saw what was to come. Chose the path of slaughter as a raven chooses which eyes to pluck from the fallen." A log cracked in the hearth. Sparks climbed like fireflies into the gloom. The skald's eye flicked toward the roof. "But the right was dangerous," he said. "The war sleep could drag you too deep. There are things beneath the veil, things old even when Ymir's bones were yet soft. Sleep too long, and they notice you. And when they do, you return changed. Or not at all." The warrior who had spoken earlier leaned closer now, curiosity warring with fear. "Why tell this now, old man?" The skald smiled, and it was not a kind smile. "Because the dream is stirring again. The signs are here. The stars bleed. The sun lingers too long. And the black hound walks the ridges of the north. One among you will seek the Dromer Sephi. One among you will learn its cost. Silence fell. The fire gave a final snap and died, leaving only the moan of wind and the creak of ancient beams. Then, quietly, too quietly, the Skald slumped forward. His breath no longer misted. His good eyes stared open, glassy and wide. The warriors sat in silence for a long while. None moved. Outside, the wind rose higher, and snow wept from the eaves like falling ash. Finally, one of the younger men stood. His face was pale, his eyes unfixed, as though listening to something just beyond hearing. "There is a place," he said. "My father spoke of it. In the hills above Igorholt. A ruin of stone and tree. Where even wolves do not go." None answered. The wind howled louder. And somewhere in the dark beyond the fire's reach, a single long, mournful howl echoed back. The Skald's tale had ended. But the dream had only begun. The exile began in blood, as all things do in the north. Kjell stood at the edge of the village, bare-chested beneath the sleet, his breath rising in thick clouds from lips split by the fists of his kin. The elders had gathered like wolves on a hilltop, grey-bearded and grim, their verdict spoken not in anger but in weary finality. He had broken the oath of kin, again, and this time the blood spilled was of the Jarl's own son, teeth shattered against the longhouse wall. No one denied the cause, no one denied the justice. But rage was a fire that burned without asking whom it consumed, and Kjell's fire had turned upon his own. The people watched in silence as he took up his axe and his cloak of wolf hide, as he turned his back to hearth and hall, and strode into the whiteness beyond the fjord like a dead man walking out of his own barrow. The land did not welcome him. The snow fell in slow, heavy flakes, muting the world to a hush broken only by the crunch of his boots and the distant croak of ravens wheeling high above. Pines loomed like dark sentinels, their limbs laden with hoarfrost, and the sky hung low with grey sorrow. He wandered north, deeper into the wilds, where no paths were marked and no gods were spoken aloud. Hunger gnawed at him with a dog's persistence, and sleep came only in snatches beneath cold stone outcroppings, where even fire dared not linger long. Yet something stirred in him now, something buried beneath years of fury and flesh. A word, a name, passed in whispers beneath his breath when the wind stilled long enough to listen, Igorholt. He had not heard it since he was a child, curled by the hearth while the old women carved antlers and muttered of days before Odin's wolves walked the sky. Igorholt, the grove of the gallows tree, where roots reached so deep they touched the bones of sleeping gods. It had been myth, a tale to frighten children and drunks. But now, in exile, the word grew teeth. The Skald's death had not left Kjell untouched. Something in the old man's tale had crawled into Kjell's marrow, warm and cruel. The war sleep. The dream walkers. A blade drawn from the soul. He knew not why it called to him. Only that it did. Days bled into one another. The snow ceased only to give way to freezing rain that turned the trees into shimmering statues. He passed no men. Only once did he see a figure, distant on a ridge at dusk, cloaked in furs, unmoving. But when he called out, it vanished. Hunger became part of him, as familiar as the weight of the axe on his back. He found no animals to hunt, save a fox with mange and milky eyes that stared at him without fear before trotting away into the gloom. He did not follow it. That night, he dreamt of fire flickering behind stone eyes and voices chanting in tongues older than thunder. On the 10th night, a storm rose like a dragon from the sea. Lightning split the sky, revealing a great ridge of stone wrapped in mist and gnarled trees. He climbed, wind tearing at his cloak, fingers bleeding as he pulled himself over slick stone and snow-draped roots. At the summit, the land opened like a wound, a hollow ring of broken monoliths, hunched like forgotten gods, encircling a sunken basin of ash and bramble. The air smelled of iron and old smoke. Here, the wind fell silent, as if the world held its breath. Kjell stepped down into the basin. The snow did not fall here. The ground was bare, the brambles crackling dry despite the storm. He knelt, pressing his palm to the earth. It was warm. Beneath his hand, the soil pulsed once, like the beat of a slumbering heart. He drew back, unsettled, but did not leave. Instead, he sat. Waited. He did not know for what. Night fell. Stars wheeled overhead like eyes without lids. The moon rose, pale and thin as bone. And then he heard it, the howl. Long, low, mournful. Not a wolf's cry, not quite. There was sorrow in it. Knowing. It came from the trees beyond the basin, where the mist moved like breathing. Kiel stood, axe in hand. The howl came again, nearer. Then silence. Then footsteps. Not man's. Not beasts. Something else. From the mist emerged a shape. A great black hound, its coat rippling with shadow, eyes burning like coals drowned in pitch. It stopped at the edge of the basin, watching. Kiel raised his axe, though his hand trembled. The hound did not growl. Did not bare teeth. It turned. Looked once over its shoulder. Waited. Kiel followed. Through the trees they moved, deeper into the wild, where bark grew with veins and the snow turned black beneath their feet. The hound padded soundlessly, its breath steaming in slow, even puffs. Hours passed, or none at all. Time twisted in the deep woods, its path no longer straight. They came to a cliff, sheer and jagged, overlooking a valley cloaked in fog. At its heart stood a mountain that did not belong. Its slopes were bare of snow, black as obsidian, its peak crowned with smoke that moved against the wind. The hound sat. Watched Kiel. He understood. This was the path. The place the Skald had named without naming. Where dreams walked, and warriors died to find their sleep. Igerholt lay not in the grove, not anymore. It had grown into the bones of the world. And Kiel, exile, oath-breaker, stonewalker, would descend into it, not as penance, not as revenge, but to find the blade in his soul. The hound vanished. The mountain waited. The wind on the ridge howled like a dirge, cleansing the skin from stone and bone alike. Beneath the aurora's flickering green veil, Kiel stood motionless, breath steaming from his nostrils like the exhalation of a forge. The mountain loomed before him, no ordinary peak, but a jagged wound upon the earth, black and brooding, its sides streaked with veins of molten rock that pulsed with a deep, crimson glow. The land at its base was barren, strewn with obsidian shards and skeletal trees that clawed at the sky as though begging for sleep that would not come. The stars above spun slowly, unnaturally, as if some great hand turned the heavens backward. And through this haunted world moved the black hound, silent as mist, its pawprints leaving no mark in the ash-laden soil. Kiel followed, his limbs numb with cold and resolve alike. Days had bled into one another without food or fire, and yet he did not falter. The hound neither glanced back nor hurried. It led him with the patience of something that had seen centuries pass like drifting leaves. At times, Kiel thought he could hear whispers in the air, voices not carried on wind but etched into it, words too old to speak aloud, pressed into the bones of the mountain by ancient suffering. The closer he came to the mountain's foot, the heavier the silence grew, until even his thoughts felt muffled beneath layers of unseen frost. They came at last to a cleft in the mountain's base, a narrow wound between twin fangs of basalt. The hound paused there, gaze fixed upon Kiel. Its eyes held no malice, only certainty, as if this moment had been lived before and would be lived again. Then it turned and walked into the darkness. Kiel followed. The air inside the crevice changed. The cold was no longer biting, but heavy, thick with old breath, like the lung of some slumbering beast. The walls of the passage were smooth as if carved by hands guided by madness, lined with runes that shimmered faintly, not with light but with memory. He could not read them, but he felt them. Each glyph thrummed like a drumbeat inside his skull, calling to something hidden deep within his marrow. As he descended, time unraveled. He no longer felt hunger, nor thirst, nor pain. Only the weight of purpose, and the silence that gathered like fog at the edge of waking. The tunnel widened into a chamber vast and vaulted, its ceiling lost in blackness. Pillars of fused bone and basalt held the space aloft, each carved with spirals and knotwork that writhed when looked at too long. A pool lay at the center, dark as a raven's eye, still and unbroken. Around it stood 9 figures, cloaked in sleep-colored robes, their faces hidden beneath hoods sewn shut with golden thread. They neither moved nor spoke, yet Kiel knew they watched. The hounds circled the pool once, then lay down at its edge and vanished like smoke pulled into the earth. The silence deepened. Then, from nowhere and everywhere, came a voice, not heard but known. "You seek the blade that sleeps." Kiel did not answer with words. His breath was his answer. His blood, still flowing despite the cold, was his answer. "You seek the right that kills without cutting. The dream that walks ahead of the waking. Do you know its cost?" Still he said nothing. The 9 figures raised their heads, and though their faces remained unseen, Kiel felt their eyes pass through him like flame through paper. The pool at the center began to stir. Not with water, but with shadow, fluid and formless, the color of forgotten sorrow. It climbed the edges of the basin, then receded, then rose again, as though the mountain breathed through it. "Then kneel, son of wrath. Let the mountain taste your veins." Kiel stepped forward. The stone beneath his feet grew warm, then hot, then searing. He knelt at the edge of the pool. One of the 9 figures moved, slow and solemn, lifting a blade as thin as a breath and as black as the space between stars. It glimmered not with light, but with the memory of pain. The figure pressed it to Kiel's chest, just above the heart. The steel hissed against flesh, and blood flowed, not red, but dark, thick with something older than life. He did not cry out. The figure dipped its fingers in the blood and drew runes upon his brow, upon his hands, upon his throat. The symbols smoked as if rejecting the air. Then the figure pressed its palm to Kiel's chest, and he was pushed backward, into the pool. He did not fall. He drifted. Darkness swallowed him. He floated through mist, through silence. The stars vanished. Time bled away. There was no body, no breath, only being. Around him moved shapes, not men, not beasts, but echoes of things that had once been. A warrior's helm turned slowly beside him, rusted and pitted, its eye slits weeping shadow. A raven flew upside down, its wings trailing feathers of frost. He passed them without fear. He had no fear left. A gate appeared, vast and root-bound, built from the bones of trees and gods alike. Upon it were carved 9 symbols, each pulsing with the same throb that beat in his veins now. The gate opened not with sound, but with understanding. And there he saw it. The battlefield beneath the stars, stretching endlessly across a plain of ash. Warriors moved like ghosts, clashing in silence, their blades made of smoke and light. Yet one among them stood still. Cloaked in sleep, crowned with bone, its face hidden behind a mask carved from the moon. It turned. And Kiel awoke. The chamber was empty. No pool, no figures, no hound. Only the runes remained, glowing faintly on the walls. But he felt it, the change. His blood no longer beat in time with the world. His eyes did not blink in rhythm with the day. He had seen beyond the veil. He had been marked. He rose, the silence clinging to him like a second skin. The war sleep had begun. The cave's mouth yawned behind him like a beast sated but not satisfied, its breath colder now than the air outside. Kiel stepped into a dawn that did not warm, the sun a pale smear behind veil upon veil of mist. The mountain loomed at his back, unmoved by the ritual it had swallowed and regurgitated. Snow clung in crusted patches to the roots of twisted firs, and the wind carried with it a scent like burnt pine and old blood. His hands were still sticky with the ink-black ichor that had flowed from him, not wholly his own, not anymore. The runes carved into his flesh throbbed faintly, not in pain, but like echoes of footsteps taken in another realm. There was no song in the trees, no bird nor branch stirred. Only silence, thick as oil, and the crunch of his boots on frostbitten earth. Hours passed, or perhaps they did not. Time felt stretched thin here, as though the air remembered too many winters and refused to count another. The trail wound down into a forest where trunks were wide as houses and moss hung from branches like the beards of drowned men. Frost laced every surface, not in patches, but in strange, branching shapes, spirals, eyes, knotwork that writhed just beyond comprehension. He saw none of it clearly, but he felt watched. Not by gods, nor beasts. By something older. The kind of watching done by stone that remembers the shaping hand, by water that recalls drowning. Then came the sound. It rose not from any one place, but from within the woods themselves, a low chant, guttural and arrhythmic, like a dozen tongues repeating a name that had no letters. Kiel moved toward it, axe loose in hand, muscles tense though he felt no fear. Fear belonged to men with futures. He had given his away beneath the mountain. The forest opened without warning, and he stepped into a clearing shaped like a broken ring. At its center stood monoliths, some whole, others cracked and fallen, each etched with the same runes that now adorned his skin. A fire burned at the circle's heart, black flame, dancing without heat, its smoke sinking rather than rising, curling into the roots of the earth like ink poured into a wound. Around the fire stood 6 figures. They wore robes the color of dusk and masks shaped like snarling wolves, mouths agape in eternal defiance. Their hands were red to the wrist, and they moved in time with the chant, swaying like reeds caught in a wind that could not be felt. They did not look at him. Not at first. He stepped forward. The earth beneath his boots did not crack or yield. It accepted him. Then one figure turned. Slowly. The wolf mask stared through him. Its voice was not a voice, but a vibration beneath the skin. "You crossed the gate." Kiel said nothing. Another turned, and another. Soon all 6 faced him. Their movements were slow, reverent, as though afraid he might vanish if seen too clearly. "The blood marked you," one hissed. "The mountain swallowed you and spat you out." Kiel raised his chin. The cold did not reach him now. He felt hollow, and in that hollowness, a strange clarity. "Are you the Drom's Virgin?" he asked, voice dry as old bark. They did not answer in word, but in gesture. One stepped forward, removing its mask. Beneath was a woman's face, weathered and pale, eyes black as pitch and rimmed with cracked coal. Her lips did not move, but he heard her. "We are the wardens of sleep, the keepers of the path, the dream that walks before the blade." The others removed their masks in turn, men and women both, none young, none whole. Each bore scars too symmetrical to be wounds of war. Marks carved with purpose, with belief. One had no nose. Another's mouth had been stitched shut with copper wire. Their eyes shimmered with something not of this world, something that did not reflect the firelight. "Why have you come?" the woman asked. Kiel let silence answer first. Then he stepped into the circle, the runes on his arms pulsing brighter. "I seek the sleep," he said. "The dream that goes before me. The war that is not yet fought." The woman's cracked lips curved, not a smile, not quite. "You seek the Drom's fall." She reached behind her and drew forth a bowl carved from the skull of a stag. In it was a black liquid that did not move like water. It quivered, almost aware. She held it out. "Drink, and be unmade. Drink, and find the steps behind your shadow." Kiel took the bowl. The others chanted now, not words, but breath and thunder, the language of root and stone. He drank. The taste was neither bitter nor sweet. It was cold, and it filled him not with sensation, but with absence. The forest faded. His skin became dust. His bones sank. He stood not in the clearing, but on a field of bone and ice. A great spear was buried in the sky, its point piercing the moon. Below it, thousands stood, not living, not dead. Warriors of every age and clan, eyes closed, unmoving. All facing one direction. And before them walked a figure cloaked in fog, dragging behind him a chain made of voices. It turned. It was Kiel. He opened his eyes. He stood in the clearing once more. The fire was gone. The wardens were gone. Only the circle of monoliths remained, and the faint scent of blood. But something had been left behind. Or perhaps taken. His eyes burned, and for a moment the world twisted, trees bleeding light, snow falling upward, the wind whispering with his own voice. Then it passed. And he knew. He was no longer walking alone. His sleep now watched ahead of him. The Drom's Virgin had shown him the path. And something on that path was waiting. The snow fell soft as ash, whispering down from a sky veiled in gray, as if the heavens grieved without sound. Kiel moved through the hushed forest like a revenant returned from the barrow, each step a quiet defiance against a world that had ceased to know him. His body bore no wounds, yet pain lingered beneath the skin, a numb throb beneath the runes etched into his arms, across his chest, down his spine. They no longer bled. Instead, they pulsed with faint light, a dull red glow that quickened with his breath, like coals that would not die. His hands, though steady, felt distant, as though he wielded them through water. He could not say how long he had walked since the dream sleep. Time twisted now, slippery and thin, unwinding like the entrails of a sacrificed stag. Morning and night had lost their shapes. The sun was but a pale smudge that drifted behind sheets of mist, and the moon, when it appeared, bore the wrong face. Kiel passed into a glade where the trees grew wide and knotted, their trunks streaked with black resin that wept like blood from bark. There was no wind, but the branches swayed slowly above him, as if stirred by breath too vast to hear. The scent of smoke clung to the air, mingled with the faint tang of iron, though no fire burned nearby. Beneath his boots the snow was disturbed. Not by hoof nor paw, but by prints that resembled neither man nor beast. Long, narrow grooves that meandered without pattern, as if something crawled on too many limbs, dragging its own shadow behind. Kiel crouched beside one of the trails, pressed a hand to the impression. It was still warm. And beneath the heat, he felt something hum. Not vibration, not movement, but memory, coiled tight like a bowstring. He stood, and for the first time since waking, the forest spoke. Not with words, but with presence. The trees straightened. The mist pulled inward. The shadows deepened. And Kiel was no longer alone. They emerged from the edges of the clearing, pale figures clothed in hide and frost, their faces hidden behind masks of bone. Antlers crowned some, others wore braids woven with crow feathers, and all moved in silence. A dozen of them, circling like wolves around a wounded elk, their breath misting in rhythm, their bare feet leaving no prints. One stepped forward, shorter than the others, the mask carved into a leer that split from jaw to jaw. In its hands, it carried a bundle wrapped in hide, bound with sinew, humming with faint sound, as if something inside it breathed. Kiel did not reach for his axe. He did not speak. The silence between them was sacred. The masked figure knelt and placed the bundle before him, then stepped back. Another stepped forward. This one was tall, robed in tattered gray, with antlers as wide as a cart. It raised its hand and pointed, not at Kiel, but at the bundle. He understood. He knelt. The hide was cold, stiff, but gave easily beneath his fingers. He unwrapped it slowly, reverently. Within lay a stone bowl, shallow and rough, carved with spirals that moved faintly beneath his gaze. Inside the bowl, a dark paste shimmered, black and crimson, the color of clotting blood mixed with crushed berries and ash. The smell hit him like a blow, smoke, sweat, rot, and something sharp beneath it, something old. It reeked of roots torn from sacred earth, of flesh steeped in secrets. The tall figure raised both hands, and the circle began to chant. Their voices were low, guttural, not speech but rhythm, a weaving of breath and throat and bone. Kiel's vision blurred. The bowl pulsed with the beat of his heart. He took the paste on his fingers and brought it to his mouth. It was bitter. And then it was everything. He fell back. The sky cracked. And the dream returned. He stood not in forest, but upon a field of red snow, beneath a sky filled with antlers that stretched from horizon to horizon. A great tree stood at the center, black as pitch, its roots writhing across the land like serpents, its branches heavy with hanging bodies. Each corpse twitched, mouths open in silent song. Crows circled, though their wings were of ice, and their eyes burned gold. Kiel walked. Around him, the air shimmered with echoes. He saw men kneel beside hearths and whisper names they did not understand. He saw women crying over stillborn sons who bore runes across their backs. He saw himself, a boy, hair matted with blood, standing before a corpse-strewn hill, the wind speaking his name in voices not his own. He walked. The tree loomed closer. Beneath its roots sat the hound, waiting. It rose when he approached. Not snarling. Not wagging. It simply turned. And Kiel followed again. They descended into the earth, through roots that parted like ribs, into caverns where water dripped in patterns too exact for chance. Down, deeper than light, past chambers filled with sleeping things, warriors with no eyes, mothers whose mouths were sewn shut, children who smiled with too many teeth. At last, they came to a chamber where no noise lived. And there he saw it. Himself. But older. Scarred beyond measure. Eyes blind, but open. The older Kiel sat cross-legged upon a stone slab, breathing slowly, hands resting on his knees, as if waiting for someone long delayed. When Kiel stepped forward, the older him opened his mouth, and spoke a word he did not understand. The world fractured. Light bled. The tree screamed. And Kiel awoke. He lay in the glade, curled in the snow. The figures were gone. The bowl was gone. Only the stone remained, beneath him, pulsing with slow heat. He sat up. The sky above had changed. The clouds had thinned, and a sliver of moon cast a pale glow over the clearing. He touched his chest. The runes blazed beneath the skin, not with light, but with memory. He remembered now. Not clearly, but enough. The war sleep was not a tool. It was not a gift. It was a path. And he was already walking it. The forest wore its silence like armor, wrapped in layers of stillness that pressed against the ears until thought itself slowed. Kiel moved beneath ancient pines whose roots curled above the earth like the fingers of drowned kings, each step swallowed by moss so thick it muffled the crunch of snow. Light did not reach here, not truly. A dim pall hung in the air, neither dawn nor dusk, as though the sky had forgotten how to turn. Frost clung to every surface like breath to bone, and the smell of earth, deep, wet, living, seeped up from beneath the rot. The war sleep clung to Kiel still. Not as fog, but as a second skin, unseen but present. He walked upright, heart beating, axe at his side, yet something in him had not returned from the dromer. His soul trailed behind him like a second shadow, thinner, longer, dragging its heels through a world only half real. He came upon a clearing where no snow fell. The ground was bare, only stone and bone, scattered like runes cast by a blind god. No trees grew here. No birds called. Yet the air trembled, and Kiel's breath slowed as he stepped within. There, on the far side, the mist curled back, and a figure appeared through it, not walking, not emerging, but simply becoming, as if it had always been there, forgotten until remembered. The shape was human in size, cloaked in ragged gray, its head bowed. Around its feet drifted fragments of song, not sung but broken, notes like fragments of memory, sung in tongues never written. Kiel's hand tightened on the haft of his axe, but he did not raise it. His skin had begun to itch with a familiar chill. The same he had felt beneath the mountain. The same as in the blood sleep. This was a place between places. A path only the dead remembered. The figure raised its head. It had no face, only smooth skin like polished bone. Where eyes should have been, there were hollows filled with starlight. Its mouth, when it opened, moved not in speech, but in motion, a shape that evoked words long dead. "You walk beside the dead," the voice said. It did not echo. It sank. "But you do not know which side you walk upon." Kiel did not answer. His breath clouded before him, then vanished, pulled downward by the strange weight of the air. He stepped closer, eyes never leaving the faceless figure. "I walk where the war sleep takes me." "You walk where it permits," the figure corrected. "Where it is drawn. And it draws toward memory." Behind the figure, the mist parted, and Kiel saw them. Figures moved through the fog in slow procession. Dozens, hundreds, warriors clad in armor rusted and torn, their helms dented, their limbs ruined. They did not speak. They did not blink. Yet each passed him with the same unfocused gaze, the same slack jaw, as if dreaming while walking. Some bore weapons. Some bore wounds that should have killed them. One, a woman with a long braid crusted in frost, dragged her own severed arm behind her like a doll. Another, A child no older than 9 winters, walked with a spear through his ribs, eyes wide, mouth whispering to no one. Kiel stood among them. They passed him without pause. "Who are they?" he asked. The faceless figure turned to watch them. "They are those who entered the sleep but did not return. Their spirits walk ever forward, drawn toward the place where the dream and death are not different." Kiel watched as more came, endless, like leaves drawn by a river. "Are they dead?" he asked. The figure shook its head slowly. "Not yet. Not fully. Not until they are forgotten." The procession continued, fading into mist, leaving only Kiel and the faceless one in the clearing once more. Silence returned, heavier now. "Why show me this?" "Because you must choose," the figure said. "You who would wield the sleep as a blade, you must understand its weight. Every vision you take steals from the dream of another. Every step forward in the drama leaves someone behind. You are not alone on the path." Kiel felt the words settle into his ribs. Cold. Heavy. "Then what is the path for?" he asked. "Why offer the sleep if it damns?" The figure's voice lowered. "Because it is the oldest door. Because there are things in the waking world that cannot be faced with open eyes." From the folds of its cloak, the figure drew forth a length of cloth, black, tattered, damp with something not water. It unrolled the bundle, revealing a helm. Iron, rimmed with fur, carved with runes along the brow. Not forged, but grown. The metal shimmered with memory. Kiel felt it before he touched it, a pressure in his skull, a whisper in a voice like his mother's. He reached out. Took it. The helm was cold. As he set it on his brow, the clearing faded. And the world shifted. He stood now upon a hill overlooking a battlefield he had never seen but knew. The trees had been burned to blackened stakes. The snow ran red in trenches dug by hoof and foot. In the distance, a great horned beast of smoke rose over the land, its mouth wide and hollow, from which came the sound of war without end. Below, men and women fought not enemies, but themselves, twins, mirror images, locked in eternal combat, their faces twisting from familiar to monstrous and back again. Kiel stepped forward. He was not in his body. He was not only himself. He was seeing. From far ahead, a raven wheeled in the ash-choked sky. Then everything turned to shadow. He awoke standing. The helm was gone. The clearing was empty. Only the bone-carved stones remained, and his own breath, ragged in his chest. The figures had vanished. The procession gone. But the vision clung to him, a brand across the soul. The war sleep had given him more than strength. It had given him sight. And what he saw had teeth. Dawn never came, not as it once had. The sun was a faded scar behind a veil of shifting mist, casting no warmth, only a sickly pallor across the land. The trees, ancient and gnarled, rose like twisted sentinels over Kiel's path, their trunks wide as ships and bark flaked with frost. Moss clung to their roots like old skin, and somewhere deep within the woods, the sound of dripping water echoed, slow, rhythmic, as if time itself bled drop by drop. Kiel moved without urgency, his boots silent against the damp ground. The war sleep still clung to him, a weight behind the eyes, a coldness in the lungs. He had not eaten in days. He did not need to. Hunger came now only in dreams, and even then, it was thin and distant. He no longer slept in the way men do. He merely closed his eyes and drifted into the fold between worlds, walking alongside things that whispered with voices like wind scraping bone. That night, or what passed for night, he found a hollow in the roots of a tree, vast enough to crouch within. The air beneath the boughs was thick with rot, yet it welcomed him. He settled there, wrapped in his cloak, his back to the curve of the tree's belly, the runes on his skin pulsing softly in the gloom. His breath slowed. The forest quieted. And then, with the stillness came the soft rustle, barely sound at all. Not from outside. From within the sleep. In the folds of the veil, where time and shadow entwined, she stood. The Raven Witch. Bird. Her cloak was made of black feathers, not sewn but grown, and they shifted with a life of their own. Her face was pale as moonlight, creased like cracked porcelain, and her eyes held the color of storms too far to see. She stood atop a low hill in the dream place, framed by a sky that bled ink, her bare feet sinking into soil that shimmered with frost. A ring of stones stood behind her, each etched with names that writhed when watched too long. Ravens perched on her shoulders, their beaks crusted with red, their eyes unblinking. Kiel stood before her, though he could not remember crossing the space between. Her voice did not rise from her lips, but from the wind that passed between the trees, cold and sharp. "You walk the paths of Dromner," she said, "and yet you do not know whose footsteps you follow." Kiel bowed his head. "I seek the sleep. I seek the blade that strikes before waking." She stepped closer, the earth blackening beneath her. The ravens turned their heads to watch him with the slow, deliberate movement of those who remember too much. "There is always a cost," she said. "Even to dream." He raised his eyes to meet hers. "I have paid. In blood. In silence. In vision. You have only given what was asked," Erd whispered, lifting a single hand, palm etched with 1,000 tiny runes. "But what of what is owed?" Kiel said nothing. The wind turned, and the ravens croaked once, sharp and hungry. She walked around him now, trailing her feathers along his shoulders. "You were marked before birth. I saw your name woven in the strands beneath the well. The wolf's breath touched your cradle. You think this is choice. But it is design." He stiffened. "Then let it be so. If the path was made for me, I will walk it." Erd's smile was cold, and without joy. Every thread pulled cost another its place. From beneath her cloak, she drew a thread, thin and silver, slick with dew. It writhed between her fingers. "This is 1 hour," she said. "From your waking life." She held it out. "I will take it. And in exchange, I will give you a name. A true name, older than yours. One spoken in dreams when the first axe fell upon flesh." Kiel stared at the thread. It glimmered with heat, and as he looked upon it, he felt something inside him ache, deep and hidden. A memory he could not grasp. The first warmth of morning light on his skin. A voice calling his name not in warning, but in love. A moment that would be lost. He reached out, took the thread, and she gave him the name. Not in words, but in understanding. It filled him like cold iron plunged into fire. He gasped, and the dream folded. He awoke with frost in his beard and tears dried to salt on his face. The tree groaned above him, and the forest beyond felt sharper, more aware. He stood slowly. Everything was the same, but not. His body was still his own. Yet something had been carved out, replaced. A name beat in his chest now. Not Kiel. A name with weight. With teeth. The witch had taken something. And in return, he knew now what walked ahead of him. Not fate. Not future. But a shadow made from his own fear. He stepped out of the hollow and into the forest. Behind him, in the dark of the tree's root, a single black feather lay. The fjord yawned wide and dark beneath a sky bruised with stormlight, its waters flat as iron and stained with streaks of oil that shimmered in unnatural hues. Kiel stood at the edge of the ruined village, his breath ragged in the frozen air, his boots sinking into mud slick with old ash and crushed bone. What once had been a place of hearths and smoke now lay drowned in silence. The longhouses were collapsed, roofs peeled back by unseen hands, timbers splintered as if gnawed by teeth too large for any beast of the land. No smoke rose from any chimney. No dogs barked. Even the gulls had vanished. What remained were remnants, charred idols of Thor and Freya buried beneath driftwood, a child's shoe half swallowed by the earth, a tangle of braided hair caught on the edge of a shattered oar. The stench was faint but present, clinging like rot to the back of the throat, not of death, but of something older, something wrong. He stepped forward, each motion deliberate, as if the air itself resisted his intrusion. The runes carved into his skin throbbed with quiet heat, a low hum that vibrated through his bones. They had been silent since the Raven Witch's bargain, but now they stirred, responding to some resonance buried in the ground beneath his feet. Kiel passed the remnants of the hall, its supporting beams jutting like broken ribs from a shallow grave, and moved toward the fjord's edge, where a warped pier jutted out into the gray water. The tide had receded, leaving behind swaths of exposed seabed littered with cracked crab shells and something else, something glinting faintly beneath the slime. He knelt and dug with bare fingers. What he uncovered was not metal, nor stone, but a shard of bone etched with runes, nearly identical to those upon his own flesh. His breath caught. The carving was crude, the work of a trembling hand, but unmistakable in its pattern: sleep, battle, silence. He turned it over. The back was stained with something dark and dry. He did not have to smell it to know what it was. Blood. Old, but not ancient. Human. He looked up and scanned the shoreline. And that was when he saw them. Figures. At the edge of the trees. Not moving. Not breathing. Watching. Kiel rose. They stood still as statues, 7 in all, draped in sea-stained cloaks and tattered tunics, hair matted with brine, skin pale as driftwood. Their faces were obscured by helms fashioned from scrap and bone, crudely shaped into visages of beasts, wolves, serpents, whales, a bear with its jaw torn open. In their hands they held weapons that should have long since rusted, axes with hafts wrapped in kelp, swords etched with barnacles, spears blackened as if pulled from fire. They did not speak. They did not blink. Kiel took a step forward, his axe loose in hand, but they made no move to meet him. Then one dropped to its knees. Another followed. And another, until all 7 knelt at the forest's edge. From the center of their formation stepped a new figure, cloaked in gray furs, her face bare, her hair long and wet as if she'd only now risen from the fjord itself. Her eyes were ringed in kohl, not for vanity, but ritual. Her lips were cracked, and when she spoke, her voice carried not across the air, but through the earth. "You dream while awake." Kiel said nothing. She approached, slow and solemn, until only a few paces separated them. Up close, he could see her arms were tattooed with runes, different from his, older, cruder, but etched with the same violence. Her breath misted between them, heavy and hot, though her skin bore no sign of warmth. "You carry the Dromer seal," she said. "The sleep mark. Few awaken from it. I was not given the choice," Kiel replied, voice hoarse. "No one is," she said. "Only the ones who bleed for it return." She turned and looked back toward the fjord. "This place, Brunifjord, it bled. Once a village. Now a scar. They sought the dream as you do. A seer came, promised them strength, clarity, safety from the beasts of the shadow. She taught them the right. But they did not dream. They drowned." Kiel stepped beside her, gazing out over the cold, gleaming waters. "What became of the seer?" The woman turned toward him, a flicker of something unreadable in her eyes. "She walks still. But not in this world. Not in flesh." The 7 behind her began to hum, a low, vibrating chant that had no tune, only rhythm. The runes on Kiel's arms began to burn. "You carry the seed of the fall," the woman whispered. "Your dreams bleed through the veil. If you do not master them, they will master the waking world." He stared at her. "Then teach me." Her eyes narrowed. "There is no teaching. Only remembering." She stepped closer and placed her palm against his chest. Her fingers were freezing. Kiel's knees nearly buckled as a vision struck him, hot and violent. He stood in a hall of mirrors, but the mirrors did not reflect. They showed other paths. Other selves. One where he knelt in chains before a burning tree. Another where he was crowned in blood, seated upon a throne of frozen corpses. Another where he lay dead on a stone slab, the ravens feasting on his heart, while the hounds slept at his feet. He gasped. She pulled her hand away. "You must carry them," she said. "Every path. Every fate. If even one slips through while you dream, it becomes real." The chanting behind them ceased. The wind rose. The figures behind her stood as one. And without another word, they turned and walked into the woods. Only the woman remained. She reached into her cloak and withdrew a black thread knotted with 3 bone beads. She held it out. Wear this. While it remains whole, so will your sleep. But when it unravels, the veil will no longer know you. Kjell took it and tied it around his wrist. The beads were warm. When he looked up, she too was gone. He stood alone by the dead fjord, blood on his palms, dreams behind his eyes. And somewhere deep in the woods, something ancient stirred. The sky cracked with no sound, a split in the firmament that ran jagged and pale like bone beneath torn flesh. Lightning without thunder danced across the heavens, illuminating the land in flashes that lasted too long, as if time itself faltered in the wake of some ancient breath. Kjell stood atop a ridge of frost-slick stone, breath steaming, eyes fixed on the horizon where the Iron Mountain rose, Jarnfjall. It was not named on any map nor whispered in any mead hall tale, yet he knew it by sight the way a child knows his mother's voice. It stood alone, black and sharp, veiled in a wreath of smoke that moved against the wind, always rising, always curling, as though drawn from the dreams of something deep beneath the stone. Its slopes were jagged with broken spires and scorched ice, and no snow touched its peak, though the world around it drowned in winter's hand. The forest behind him had gone still, no branch creaking, no raven calling. Even the wind had died. Only the sky spoke now, and its words were light and fracture. Kjell descended the ridge without thought, drawn forward by a pull that had no shape. The runes on his arms were fever-hot, pulsing in rhythm with something buried. Within the mountain, within himself, he could not tell. Each step closer felt heavier, as though the air thickened, turning to syrup around him. Trees grew sparse, bent and blistered as if scorched in ages past, their limbs twisted into grotesque angles. The snow here bore a dull sheen, not white but the color of old ash, and beneath it, he could see the glimmer of black rock, veined with red like a wound that refused to close. He reached the base of the mountain as dusk fell, though no sun had shone that day. The light dimmed all the same, fading to a dull gray that leached the color from the world. Before him stood a stone gate carved directly into the mountain's face, its threshold framed by 2 massive statues, warriors, eyeless and crowned, their hands resting upon swords plunged into the earth. The runes on their blades flickered faintly in the gloom, not with magic, but with memory. Kjell stepped between them. The gate opened with no sound, not swinging nor grinding but simply receding into shadow, like a mouth swallowing breath. Inside, the air grew warmer, not comforting, but suffocating, thick with the smell of smoke and copper and wet stone. The tunnel sloped downward, and the walls bled warmth, slick with condensation that tasted of iron when it touched his lips. The light within the mountain did not come from flame, nor torch, but from veins in the stone that pulsed softly, as if blood still moved through them. Kjell followed their glow, deeper and deeper, until the tunnel widened into a cavern vast enough to swallow a fleet. At its center, rising from a pit of molten shadow, stood a spire of iron, tall, jagged, and covered in runes that moved like things alive. Around its base, figures knelt, silent, motionless, their forms indistinct beneath layers of soot and ash. One rose. She was tall, wrapped in tattered robes that might once have been white, though now they were the color of dried blood. Her hair was shorn close, her scalp marked with inked spirals, and in her hand she held a staff of bone capped with a shard of obsidian. Her eyes met Kjell's, and they were not eyes at all, but orbs of dark glass that reflected only him. "You have come to the heart," she said. Her voice echoed from stone and shadow alike. "Do you know what burns here?" He did not answer. She stepped closer. The others remained kneeling, unmoving, as if frozen in prayer. "This is the fire beneath the veil," she said. "The breath of the first dreamer. Jarnfjall was not formed by earth, nor by sea. It was shaped from sleep." Kjell felt the weight of her words settle upon him like a yoke. His skin prickled, his limbs ached. "Then why draw near?" he asked. "Because only here can the dream be forged into weapon," she said. "Only here can the vision strike the waking world." She gestured toward the spire. "You have walked far, Kjell. You have bled. You have seen what lies beneath and beyond. But the blade must be made. And to make it, something must be given. He approached the spire. The heat now was unbearable, not of fire, but of thought, old, layered, echoing. Every step brought memories not his own, a boy buried beneath stones, a woman who screamed as her sleep was taken, a beast whose dreams birthed storms. His legs trembled. The runes on his flesh flared white. "What must be given?" he asked. She did not smile. "You must burn the part that remains awake." Kiel turned toward her. "I have no fear," he said. "It is not fear," she replied. "It is memory. You must cast it into the pit." He looked down. The pit seethed with smoke, thick and slow, writhing like a nest of serpents. Beneath it, no flame burned. Only darkness. A darkness that watched. He reached into the pouch at his side. Within it were small things. A carved stone given to him as a child. A length of leather from his father's belt. A ring of knotted iron, once worn by a woman whose name he no longer dared remember. He took them all. One by one, he cast them into the smoke. The shadows surged. A wind rose within the mountain. The spire cracked. Light poured from it, not bright, but deep, a red that pulsed in time with the earth itself. Kiel fell to his knees, eyes wide, mouth open in a scream that made no sound. And then silence. When he stood, the others were gone. The spire was gone. In his hand was a blade, not made of steel, but of shadow and heat, etched with runes that wept slow light. The dream had taken form. Jarnkjal had given its gift, and the veil would never close again. Beneath the high, hollow sky, where the stars watched like ancient, pitiless eyes, the world had grown still. The snow no longer fell, yet the land was colder than ever, the kind of cold that lived in bone and buried itself like rust in old iron. Kiel walked alone through the glacier fields beyond Jarnkjal, the blade of dreamlight strapped across his back, humming faintly with a rhythm that was not his heartbeat. The mountain was behind him now, though he could still feel it watching, its breath warm and slow in the spaces between thoughts. Each step away from it seemed to cost him something, a sliver of memory, a strand of time, a heartbeat that would not return. The landscape stretched endlessly, a realm of blue ice and shadow, broken only by spires of frozen stone that reached like fingers toward a sky too wide, too empty. It was here, in this barren place, that he felt the ground beneath him stir. It was not an earthquake. It was deeper, slower, a movement beneath movements, a pulse in the flesh of the world. He stopped. The ice cracked beneath his boots, not violently, but with purpose, like something beneath it had drawn breath. He turned, eyes scanning the horizon. There was no wind. The sky did not move. Yet something ancient shifted below. The first sound was a groan, low and long, not made by throat or beast, but by something vast and sleeping. Then came the pressure, a heaviness in the chest, as though the air had thickened into water. Kiel dropped to one knee, hands pressed to the frost. The runes on his arms began to flicker erratically, dim and sharp, like fire caught in the throes of suffocation. From the edge of the world, beneath a ridge of frost-bitten stone, rose the sound of cracking. The glacier split. Ice heaved and trembled as something vast pushed upward, not in violence, but with the inevitability of a mountain rising through time. He saw its shape only in glimpses, limbs like trunks of petrified trees, skin thick and ridged with hoarfrost, a back hunched beneath centuries of sleep. It was not Jotun as in the sagas, but something older, a dream long buried beneath the breath of gods. Its face was not a face, but a mask of ice with no mouth, no eyes, only a void, a space where thought and silence mingled. It moved not in steps, but in shudders, as if its very presence warped the world around it. Wherever it passed, the ice melted not into water, but into mist that rose and wept. Kiel did not run. He could not. The thing paused in its rising and turned toward him, not with gaze, but with attention. The full weight of its dreaming settled upon him, and the world around him ceased to be. No sky. No ground. Only a darkness full of memory. He stood again in the cave beneath Jarnkjal, though the iron spire was gone. He saw again the woman cloaked in feathers, her back turned. He saw the child with the spear through its ribs. He saw 1,000 versions of himself dying in 1,000 different ways, some heroic, some pitiful, all inevitable. The Dreamwalker. The Oathbreaker. The Vessel. A voice came, not spoken, but planted in his soul like a seed. It did not ask. It did not command. It simply knew. You are not alone in the dream. Kiel opened his eyes. The glacier was gone. He stood in a place that should not be. A valley of black stone, where rivers flowed upward and stars wheeled too fast overhead. The creature stood in the center, vast and still, its form no longer bound to shape. Around it stood others, lesser, smaller, echoes of its thought. They shimmered at the edges, as if made of fog and memory, and their eyes, those that had them, burned with dreams not meant for men. Kiel stepped forward, the blade across his back now cold. The ground trembled. One of the smaller forms broke from the circle and approached. It had no legs, only the suggestion of movement, a slithering of purpose. It reached toward him, and Kiel felt a scream claw at his throat, not of fear, but of knowing. In its presence, he understood what the war sleep had hidden. These were the first dreamers. Not gods. Not mortals. But the beginnings of thought, beings who had shaped the first silence with their longing. And now they stirred again, drawn by the noise of the waking world, by the weapons carved from dreams, by the bleeding of the veil. The creature touched him. He fell. And in falling, he did not land, but shattered. His soul spilled out into the valley. He saw the forest again, and the Raven Witch's hand pulling threads from the night. He saw the villagers of Brunifjord kneeling in silence, as the sea drank their breath. He saw the Drom's Verja burning in a ring of flame, their masks weeping blood. He saw himself standing atop the final hill, the blade raised high, and the sky screaming as it cracked apart. He saw all paths, all ends, and then he was whole again. The creature withdrew, and Kiel knelt in the ash of the black valley, breathless, hollowed. When he looked up, the great sleeper was gone. Only the mist remained, curling low over the stone like a blanket drawn over a corpse. He stood slowly. The blade on his back was warm again. The war sleep had opened the door, and something had stepped through. The wind returned with the taste of old blood on its breath, sweeping down from the mountains in long, hollow gusts that rattled the pines and stirred ash from the bones of forgotten fires. Kiel stood on the edge of a dead meadow, where the snow had not settled in months, as if the land itself rejected the softness of winter. The grass beneath his boots was brittle and blackened, and the sky above hung low and red as if the sun had bled out behind the clouds. In the center of the field stood the barrow mound, rounded and silent, ringed with standing stones so ancient they bore no carvings, only the wear of centuries, as if hands had once clutched at them in agony. A murder of crows circled high above, silent and restless, never descending. Kiel's fingers hovered over the blade at his back, though he knew no steel, not even one born of dream and sleep, could guard him here. He had come not for war, but for warning. The wind fell still as he stepped across the threshold of the stones. The air changed. Thicker, not in scent, but in time, every breath heavy with the weight of things unspoken. The blade on his back hummed low, uncertain. He moved forward, past twisted thorns and scorched root, until he stood at the mouth of the mound. The entrance was nothing more than a black arch beneath a crust of stone and moss, but even from a distance he could feel the cold seeping out, an old cold, not of ice, but of silence sealed too long. He dropped to one knee and pressed his palm to the ground. It trembled. And then the voice came. Not from the barrow. From the air itself, shaped in the hollows between gust and breath. Kiel. He rose slowly, eyes scanning the field. Kiel, son of Sten, last of the frost's blood. Hear me. The voice was hollow, the sound of wind through ribs, distant yet familiar in a way that made his blood slow in his veins. From the shadows of the mound, a figure emerged, at first no more than a silhouette in the gray light, but as it neared, its shape sharpened. A man, tall and broad of shoulder, with a wolf pelt across his back and one hand resting on the haft of an axe worn down to splinters. His face was gaunt, eyes dark hollows beneath a brow carved in sorrow. A scar ran from temple to jaw, old and gray. Kiel's mouth opened, but no word came. It was his father, or the echo of him. "Your bones are colder than mine," Kiel whispered. The figure stopped a few paces away. Its breath did not cloud the air. "You walk the war sleep," the spectre said. "But you do not yet know what you carry." "I carry a blade," Kiel said. "A dream, shaped into iron." The figure shook his head. "You carry a breach." Silence. Then wind again, rustling the tall, black grass like dying fire. "You saw it," the spirit said. "The sleeper beneath the ice. The old ones who stir. And you think it a sign? You think it a summons?" Kiel's hand closed into a fist. "They know the dream. They shape what we forget. They feed on what we forget," his father snapped. "The war sleep is not a path. It is a wound. And every time you close your eyes, the wound bleeds more." "I was chosen," Kiel said. "The Skald said so. The hound led me. The runes marked me." The spectre stepped forward, close enough now that Kiel could see the cracks in his skin, as if he had been carved from clay and left too long in frost. "There were others," the ghost said. "Before you. Warriors who slept to see what lay beyond battle. Men who dreamt of victory before the first horn sounded. Women who heard the whispers beneath the snow. All of them now walk in circles. Lost in memory, fed upon, hollowed. Then why speak now?" Kiel demanded. "Why come to me if it is already too late?" "Because you have not passed the 9th seal," his father said. A weight settled over the land with those words. The crows above stopped circling. The wind ceased. Even the hum of the blade fell silent. "There are 9, the spectre whispered. 9 dreams that bind the veil to the waking. 9 seals carved not with blades, but with sacrifice. 8 are broken." Kiel staggered. The ground beneath his feet felt suddenly thin. "Who broke them?" he asked. The spirit did not answer, only raised a finger and pointed to him. The silence roared. Kiel fell to one knee, not from pain, but from the knowledge that fell into him like a black tide. The dreams he had walked, the visions, the bargains, the blade, each had been a breach, each a wound in the veil. Not just passage, but breaking. His presence in the dreamscape had not been passive. It had been consumption. He had fed the fire. "The 9th seal lies within you," the ghost said. "And once it breaks, there will be no more sleep. No more waking. Only the storm of dreams given flesh." Kiel stared into his father's dead eyes. "Then what do I do?" The spirit stepped back, fading with each breath. "You must remember what you are. Tell me." But the ghost was gone. Only the wind remained, and the hush of a world just before its screams. The sea of mirrors stretched before him, infinite and silent, a vast and frozen plain where sky and ice became one. No waves stirred, no gulls cried. There was no salt on the wind, no wind at all. The surface of the water was perfectly still, reflecting not the world above, but the one beneath. It did not mirror the sky, it mirrored thought, memory, the dream beneath the skin. Kiel stood at its edge, breast shallow, the blade at his back flickering with pale light, its runes shifting like fish beneath the surface of a frozen stream. Here, in this place, direction held no meaning. The world was a circle with no center, and time folded upon itself like a serpent devouring its tail. Behind him, the shore was already fading, vanishing into mist. Ahead, only the glassy plain remained, endless and unknowable. And he had no choice but to walk. His first step echoed. Not upon water, nor ice, but something in between. It did not crack, did not yield. It simply accepted his weight like a memory accepts the return of a forgotten name. Each step was harder than the last, not in labor but in will. The farther he moved from shore, the more the world unraveled around him. Sounds faded. Breath thickened. Even his heartbeat seemed distant, muffled, as if it beat now in a different body. Beneath the mirror's surface, shapes began to stir, not physical things, but impressions. Glimpses of other lives. His own, fractured and scattered. He saw himself as a child, eyes wide with terror before a fire that devoured his village. His mother screaming. His father dragging him away, blades slick with blood. He saw himself older, laughing in the mead hall, the laughter ringing false even in memory. He saw his first kill, a bandit with cracked teeth and a begging tongue. He saw the fury afterward, the tears he had hidden, the night he buried the axe and swore he'd never draw it again. He saw how quickly that oath broke. The surface began to shift, no longer flat but rippling inward with each step, like a dream resisting intrusion. Then he heard the voices. Not from above. From beneath. They whispered not words but feelings, longing, grief, regret. The language of shadows that never find the light. He walked on, and the whispers grew louder, more insistent, pulling at the threads of his memory. Faces emerged beneath the ice, comrades lost to blade and blizzard. Enemies he could not forget. Women whose names had blurred into the mists of time. Their eyes were open. Watching. Blaming. He staggered. For a moment, he saw himself reflected in the mirror. But it was not him. It was the man he might have become, taller, crowned in gold, eyes black and empty. A tyrant. The dreamwalker made king. His blade stained not with blood, but with the souls of those he'd sacrificed for knowledge. He looked away. But the image remained. Kiel moved faster now, each step dragging pain from places he hadn't known could ache. The blade across his back grew heavier, the runes flaring with each whisper, each memory surfaced. Then he reached the center. It was marked not by stone, nor fire, but by silence. A silence so complete it hurt. The air grew thick and cold. The surface beneath his feet turned black, as if burned by old sorcery. And there, in the center of the sea, rose a figure, slow and silent, emerging not from beneath but from within. A woman, draped in veils of smoke and frost, her hair a mantle of ice, her eyes vast and gray. She bore no weapon. She needed none. The power in her presence was old, terrible, and beautiful. "You have come far," she said. Her voice was not sound. It was memory pressed into the mind. Kiel said nothing. "You seek the blade that dreams. But you carry more than steel." Still, he was silent. "You carry the fracture," she whispered. "The wound that weeps into both realms. Your memory is not yours alone. Your path was braided with others. And now, you must choose which strand to sever." She raised her hand. From the mirror rose 3 figures. The first was his mother, wrapped in furs, hands outstretched, tears frozen on her cheeks. She mouthed his name. Her breath fogged the air, even here. The second was a stranger, a warrior Kiel had slain in a border raid, whose name he had never learned. The man stood with eyes filled not with hate, but with sorrow. The third was Kiel himself. Not as he was now, but as he had been the night he first walked the Dromer. Young. Angry. Lost. "You may keep only one," the woman said. "The rest must be forgotten. Cast from you. Into the deep. Or you will drown in your own shadow." Kiel's heart pounded. Each figure stood silent. Waiting. He looked at his mother. Then at the nameless man. Then at himself. And he understood. Not a test. A price. He stepped forward. His younger self met his gaze, eyes still filled with questions, hands still bloodless. Kiel reached out. "I thank you," he whispered. "But I do not need you anymore." And he pushed. The reflection broke. The mirror split. The younger Kiel fell backward into the dark, his cry silent, his body unraveling into strands of light. The sea of mirrors shuddered. The other 2 figures vanished. The woman lowered her hand. "You have chosen." The blade on his back burned hot, then cold. The world tilted. And Kiel fell, not into water, but into memory undone. When he rose, he was alone on a shore of black glass. The sea behind him was gone. Before him lay a road he did not recognize. But it was the only one left. The wind that greeted Kiel as he stepped onto the shore was not cold, though it carried the scent of salt and old wood. It moved like breath from a dying god, warm and slow, and it whispered through the tall grass with voices that were not words. Before him stretched a barren coastline, the earth pocked with shallow pools of black water, their surfaces still as mirrors. The sky was low and brackish, filled with strands of motionless cloud, and somewhere far beyond the haze, gulls cried out, but no wings stirred. His boots left no imprint in the dark sand. Even the sea did not move. It sat in silence, as though waiting. Kiel tightened the grip on the blade strapped to his back. The weapon had grown heavier since the Sea of Mirrors, its weight not in steel but in presence. It did not hum now. It breathed. It pulsed in time with the tide that did not move. He saw the ship before he knew he was looking at it, an outline in the fog, a shape carved from the old world. It sat half-submerged just beyond the inlet, its hull black with rot, its masts bowed under the weight of torn sails that drifted like funeral cloth in the still air. There was no crew, no torchlight, no motion. Yet it waited, anchored not by rope or rock, but by something deeper. As Kiel drew near, the water at his feet recoiled. The pools boiled softly, not with heat but with memory, and he saw things in them, faces, half-formed and whispering, eyes that stared from beneath the surface with longing and fury. He did not pause. His path was fixed. The gangplank was down. Moss and dried brine covered it, and the wood creaked as he stepped aboard. The deck groaned, yet it held. Salt crusted the rails, and here and there, long-dried blood trailed in sigils only the dead would recognize. He looked to the helm and found it empty. No captain. No oarsman. Only silence, thick and unmoving. Then, from below, the first sound came. A breath. Drawn deep. Slow and wet, as though lungs long unused remembered their purpose. Kiel turned toward the stairwell. The air around it shimmered faintly, like heat above iron. With one hand on the hilt of his blade, he descended. The light dimmed as he went down, though no torches burned. The walls of the underdeck were lined with shields, not hung, but embedded, pressed into the wood like barnacles. Each bore a different mark, clans long forgotten, kings long fallen. The floor beneath him was slick with condensation. Or sweat. He could not tell. The breath came again, louder now, and it carried with it a sound like distant waves breaking on hollow rock. At the bottom, the hold opened into a single vast chamber. And they were there. The crew. Dozens of them, seated in perfect stillness, backs straight, hands folded over their laps. They did not move. They did not blink. Each wore a helm made of bone and rusted iron, their armor lacquered with old pitch and blood. Some were missing limbs. Others bore wounds that should have undone them. Yet they breathed. All of them. Slowly in rhythm. Their chests rising and falling as one. It was not life. It was not death. It was something between, suspended, sustained. A voice echoed in the chamber. "You have boarded the drawn skip." It came from everywhere and nowhere, thick as mist, slow as frost. Kiel stepped forward, eyes searching. None of the warriors stirred. But one, seated at the front, exhaled smoke from the slit in his helm. His hand moved, just barely, fingertips tapping once against the hilt of a blade that lay across his knees. The motion echoed like thunder in the stillness. "You walk the drummer," the voice continued. "You have crossed the mirrors. You have been seen by the sleeper." Kiel's voice cut through the fog like a blade. "I have not broken." "No," the voice agreed. "But you have thinned. You are no longer wholly in one realm. The blade you carry marks you. The seals have tasted you." He stepped toward the seated warrior. "Then speak plainly. Why am I here?" "To see what waits," the voice whispered. "To know what follows if the seal breaks." The warrior's head lifted, and from the darkness beneath his helm came a sound not unlike laughter, dry, hollow, half-forgotten. He rose, and with his rising, so too did the rest. One by one, the dream-crewed warriors stood, in silence, like shadows gaining weight. Their eyes burned behind their helms, not with fire, but with reflection. Each pair of eyes showed a different face. A different future. Kiel stepped back. "Are you me?" "No," said the voice. "We are what becomes." The warriors advanced in unison, slow and inevitable. "We are the selves you sacrificed to take the blade. We are the lives unraveled to forge your path. We are what was severed when you chose the war sleep." The blade at Kiel's back surged with heat. The lead warrior drew his own weapon. A blade just like Kiel's, only darker. Bent. Split. It screamed as it was unsheathed, a high, thin note that made the planks groan beneath their feet. "If the seal breaks, we walk," the voice said. "Not as dreams, but as you." Kiel's grip tightened. "What do you want?" The warrior stopped an arm's length away. His voice, when it came, was not mist, not echo, but Kiel's own. "Wait," he said, and drove his blade forward. Steel rang. Runes flared. The hold burst with light. And then, nothing but the sound of breath. Again slow. Together. Waiting. Time staggered backward through the black valley of Svarthal, where the trees bent not from wind but from memory folding in upon itself. Kiel emerged from the longship's underdeck with breath raw in his throat, and the taste of steel still lingering on his tongue. The crew of dreamers, those pale, silent echoes, had not pursued him. They remained within, breathing together, waiting for the seal to crack and the veil to rot. Behind him, the drawn skip drifted slowly into the mist, anchorless and forgotten, as if the battle within had never occurred. The shore was not the same. The sky above had dimmed to a bruised purple, and the moon hung lower than it should, too large and too bright, like an eye without a lid. The stars circled it in reverse. The land pulled him forward, not with force, but with implication. He did not know the path, yet he followed it, as one follows the slope of a dream toward its end. The trees along the way shimmered like old ghosts, each trunk gnarled with faces frozen in expressions of grief or fury. The ground steamed in places where ice met roots that bled sap thick as tar. No sound lived in that place save for the dull pulse of the blade on his back, its runes burning with each breath he took, as though feeding from the thinning veil between waking and sleep. Svarthal was not marked on any map. It did not exist in the world as men understood it. It was a pocket of time collapsed inward, a wound where moments leaked in the wrong direction. And Kiel walked straight into it. The wind here flowed backwards. The trees shed leaves that returned to branches. He stepped forward and saw his footprints vanish behind him, erased by the land itself. His memories began to surface, unbidden, half-formed. He saw his own face as a child, mouth open in a silent scream as a wolf leapt from flame. He saw his mother's hand reaching through the smoke, clawed and wrong. He saw the black hound again, sitting atop a stone mound, waiting with eyes like twin moons. He blinked, and the vision was gone, replaced by mist and bark. The deeper he went, the more the air grew thick with the scent of pine and decay, a strange sweetness that stuck in the throat and tasted of burial rites. There were shapes moving ahead in the gloom, slow, circular shapes, robed in darkness. They danced without music, heads bowed, arms raised to nothing. He passed them without interruption. They paid him no mind. Perhaps they didn't see him. Perhaps they were memories worn thin by time, looping endlessly in some ritual long forgotten by the gods. Then the world split. Not with sound, but with certainty. He stepped into a clearing that did not exist a moment before. The light here was golden, warm, impossible. The grass was green, the sky blue, birdsong floated on the breeze like a lullaby. It was wrong. Painfully wrong. His knees buckled. He dropped to the earth, choking on the sudden peace of it. The sword at his back burned white-hot. A woman approached across the field. She wore no cloak, no armor, only a shift of linen. Her hair was gold, her smile soft. Her eyes were his. "Hello, my son," she said. Kiel staggered back. "No." She stepped closer. "Yes." "You are not her." "I am." "You died." "I did." He clenched his fists. Then what are you? A memory given breath, she said. A lie with teeth. But that does not make me untrue. He looked around. The world shimmered. Every leaf too perfect, every shadow too soft. This is not real, he said. Neither is the dream, she answered. And yet you walk it. She knelt before him and took his hand. Do you remember your name? He pulled away. I remember what I became. And what were you before? He shook his head. It doesn't matter. It does, she said. Because here, in this place, time unwinds. You must remember what was undone. You must choose which thread to follow forward. The golden light flickered, and the valley was dark again. She was gone. In her place stood a man, tall and cloaked in ice. It was Kiel. Older. Scarred. Eyes hollowed by knowledge. He drew the blade, twin to Kiel's own, and spoke not with voice, but with presence. You were born beneath the storm. Your name was broken before your first breath. You were shaped by sleep and forged in silence. But you are not alone in your path. I am the choice you did not make. Kiel raised his hand. The blade leapt into it like a returning soul. The older version of himself raised his own. Steel met steel. But it was not a battle. It was a reckoning. Each strike sang with memory. Each clash cast sparks that burned the air into images. Kiel holding a dying friend, Kiel burning a map he dared not follow, Kiel burying his own name beneath a stone marked only with runes. The sword screamed with each collision. The valley twisted. Trees ungrew. Birds flew backward into eggs. The world inverted itself again and again. And then he saw it. The ninth seal. It hovered above them, an orb of shadow and light, pulsing with threads of fate too fine to grasp. His older self looked up. Break it, he said, or walk away. But choose. Kiel stepped forward. The blade fell silent. The seal spun, and he raised his hand. The choice burned through him, and time began to scream. The ground cracked beneath the weight of the dead king's return. Sigvard, the Draugr king, rose from the cairn with silence like a cloak, his body stiff with frost, his bones bound together not by flesh but by will. The wind stilled. The trees held their breath. Even the ravens abandoned the sky, as if unwilling to watch what stirred from the soil. Kiel stood alone at the edge of the burial field, the blade of dream light pulsing across his back, humming like a dying lullaby. Ash and snow mixed in the air, thick and slow. There were no words left in this land, only the groan of earth remembering its dead. Sigvard's crown gleamed dully beneath the mist, its jagged points forged not of gold but of twisted iron, warped by fire and soaked in the nightmares of 1,000 warriors. His eye sockets were empty, yet from them poured smoke, slow and black, trailing like veins into the sky. His armor was patchwork, pieces taken from the fallen, runes etched in languages long vanished. Where his heart should have been was a hollow space, and within that hollow pulsed a shard of shadow, bright and dark at once. The war sleep had not birthed Sigvard. It had awoken him. He said no word as he stepped forward. His axe dragged behind him, carved from stone and bone, and it left no trail. The soil did not shift beneath his feet. Time seemed unwilling to touch him. The seals Kiel had broken, the rites endured, the visions embraced, had brought more than clarity. They had brought the dead king's gaze. Kiel's fingers tightened around the hilt of his blade. The runes along his arms glowed with the rhythm of a heartbeat that wasn't his. He could feel the seal above him. Though he had not shattered it, it now hung open like a wound, a crack in the sky leaking memory and madness. Through that fissure, Sigvard had come. When he spoke, his voice was wind in a crypt, 1,000 voices layered in one, each dragging syllables through centuries of silence. You have danced on the edge of dream too long, child of sleep. You have called what should not wake. Kiel took one step forward, snow crusting around his boots. You were buried, bound beneath stone and story. You were sealed. Seals break. That is their nature. The ground trembled. Roots snapped beneath the earth. The standing stones around them, old as the sky, cracked down their centers, releasing steam that stank of rot and despair. From the fissures rose figures, swathed in tattered cloaks, their faces smeared with ash, their eyes empty. They were the king's court, the ones who had walked into the barrow with him, never to return. Now they stood once more, blades in hand, dreams long forgotten. Kiel drew his sword. It made no sound as it left its sheath, only a sudden hush, as if the world paused to listen. The blade's edge shimmered, its light deep and cold, like the glow of stars drowned beneath the sea. He did not raise it yet. He waited. Sigvard tilted his head. You wear the rune-burned skin. You walk with the curse of vision. Yet you do not kneel. Kiel's voice was steady. I've knelt to nothing since the veil took my name. The Draugr king smiled. Or perhaps it was only the stretching of cracked flesh around ancient teeth. Then you are already half mine. The court stepped forward. Kiel moved. The first came fast, a wraith woman wrapped in chain mail that hissed with every motion. Her blade sang like a flute made of bone. Kiel met her strike with his own, steel on silence, and the runes across his arms flared with light that seared her flesh. She hissed, staggered, and crumbled into ash. Another followed, a giant of a man with a rusted spear, eyes like dead moons. Kiel ducked beneath the thrust and slashed upward, severing the figure from shoulder to hip. It did not scream. None of them screamed. They came together, 6, then 8, then more, warriors twisted by death and dream, bound to Sigvard's will. But Kiel did not fall. The blade guided him. Not with thought, but with memory. Every swing of the sword was a fragment of someone else's life, an echo from an age long gone. He moved through the horde like a ghost of vengeance, cuts clean, steps sure. The ground grew slick with ash and memory. And yet, for every one he felled, 2 more rose. At the center of it all, Sigvard watched. Not once did the king lift his axe. Not once did he move. He waited, as if the battle was beneath him, or as if it were not battle at all, but a test. At last, the last of the Draugr fell, a woman crowned in ivy and horn, who kissed Kiel's cheek before turning to dust. Only the king remained. The world was quiet. And then Sigvard stepped forward. Kiel raised his blade. The air froze between them. Their weapons met. The sound was not of steel. It was thunder. Each blow shattered the sky above, stars blinking out one by one. Their strikes echoed backward through the land, cracking stone, splitting trees. The runes on Kiel's flesh screamed with every movement. He bled from the eyes, but he did not fall. Sigvard fought like a storm given form, a tempest of precision and hate. Yet for every wound he gave, Kiel answered. Not as man, not as god, but as one who had walked sleep and returned with its fire. Their battle was not measured in time. It lasted until the moon bled, until the grass beneath them turned black, until the seal above flickered like a dying flame. And then Kiel drove the blade forward. Not into the heart. Into the hollow. The space within Sigvard's chest where no soul lived. The king gasped. For the first time, he looked afraid. Kiel whispered, I do not fear what sleeps. And he drove the blade deeper. Sigvard staggered, crown tilting, mouth open in silent horror. His body cracked, not like stone, but like glass. He fell. And the court, the stones, the field, everything, fell with him. Kiel dropped to one knee. The blade hissed. The seal above pulsed once, then went still. But something beyond it stirred. The eclipse came without warning. One breath the sun hung low and pale in the winter sky, shrouded in mist but present. The next, it darkened, not behind clouds or storm, but behind something vaster. A circle of perfect blackness devoured it from the edges inward, like an eye closing on the world. The sky turned bronze, then ash-gray, and finally the color of wet stone. Shadows lengthened, distorted, reached across the land like fingers seeking warmth in a dead hearth. Trees shuddered, birds fell silent, and the earth sighed as if bracing for a memory too long buried. Kiel stood upon a frozen hill, his breath vanishing into air thick with silence. The blade at his back, forged from dream and blood and sleep, pulsed slowly, dimly, as if it, too, feared what came. He had not spoken since the fall of Sigurd. The ground where the Draugr king had fallen was now a hollow circle of black frost, surrounded by the shattered remains of his court. No grass would ever grow there again. No sleep would come easy to those who passed. Kjell had walked away not with triumph, but with the knowledge of what the broken seal had allowed. The air had changed. The world had grown thinner. The veil that separated dream from waking now wore holes, and through them, the dead did not come, but the never-born. Now, as the light above flickered out entirely, he felt the veil move again. A whisper stirred the silence. Not from the sky. From the roots. From beneath the frost, beneath the bones, beneath the long-forgotten places where names still echoed without lips. The trees bent as something passed between them, too fast to see, but not to feel. A cold that was not cold. A presence that pressed against the edges of his mind like a blade sliding beneath skin. He turned. And she was there. Urd. The Raven Witch. Her cloak dragged behind her like a shadow caught in windless weather. Her face was gaunter than before, eyes sunken deeper, as though time had gnawed at her in the hours since their last meeting. The black feathers on her shoulders rustled though no breeze stirred. Ravens circled above her, silent as smoke, their wings folding and unfolding in rhythm with some unseen breath. "You broke it," she said. Kjell nodded once. "I had to." Her eyes narrowed. "You did not." He stepped toward her. "He would have unmade everything." Urd looked past him. "And now something worse wakes." A silence stretched between them, long and brittle. Somewhere, faint and distant, a child began to weep, a sound not carried by wind, but by memory. "There's more," Kjell said. "Beyond the veil. I saw it in the seal's light. I felt it when he fell. Something stirs in the deep." She tilted her head, a motion too fluid, too slow. "The Jotun. The first dreamers. The ones who slept before death had a name. They're waking." "No." She stepped closer. "They are not waking. They are dreaming louder." He felt the weight of her words settle like ash on his skin. The runes along his arms flared, bleeding warmth that stung rather than soothed. The blade across his back hummed low, like a beast in mourning. "What do I do?" he asked. Urd raised one hand. In it, she held a second thread. Pale gray, braided with strands of her own hair and beads carved from bone. It pulsed faintly, as if alive. "Another bargain." Kjell's jaw tensed. "You already have 1 hour from me. Each night. For the rest of my life." She smiled, but it did not reach her eyes. "This is not for time. This is for breath." He said nothing. She stepped forward, closer now than she'd ever been. The lines in her face were carved deep, not from age but from remembrance. She reached out, touched his chest, just above the heart. "Give me your last breath," she said. "When the end comes. Not before. Not after. The final one. The one that carries your name back into the dark." "And what do I gain?" "Clarity," she said. "A path through the deep dream. A way to seal what cannot be closed." Kjell's throat tightened. "You want my death. I want what remains after it." He looked at her hand. At the thread. At the ravens above, now circling faster, as if sensing the weight of choice. "Swear to me," he said. "Swear that with my breath, you will bind the veil." Urd blinked slowly, and for a moment, the feathers on her cloak trembled like something alive beneath them. "I swear." He took the thread. It burned his palm. The ravens screamed. The sky split. And the eclipse deepened. From the broken sun poured not light, but shadow, liquid and thick, falling upon the world in slow, black torrents. The land writhed where it touched. Trees twisted. Rivers reversed. The ground beneath his feet cracked and wept smoke. From the horizon, a sound rose, not a howl, not a roar, but a deep, mournful exhale. The first dreamer was stirring. Urd vanished. Only the thread remained curled around his wrist like a promise unkept. Kjell stood alone on the hill as the sky bled memory, and the world began to forget itself. And still, the blade whispered, "Not yet. Not yet. Not yet." Kjell walked into the cave of Ursa beneath a sky that no longer knew the sun. The black threads of eclipse still stained the air, drifting like the hair of a drowned god, and the wind was thick with ash that fell upward, defying gravity and reason. The trees behind him whispered backward now, speaking in syllables that had never been uttered aloud. The land itself had begun to come undone. Yet the cave held its place, carved into a cliff of obsidian stone that hummed softly beneath his boots. No snow clung to it. No frost kissed its lip. It opened not like a wound, but a mouth that had waited too long to speak. The blade at his back had gone cold. The runes along his arms no longer burned. The silence had settled over him like a second skin. Only the thread around his wrist, Bird's final bargain, still pulsed faintly with a life not his own. He crossed the threshold, and the light behind him vanished. Not dimmed, vanished. No transition. No gradient. Just blackness so deep it became sound, thick and breathless. His eyes adjusted slowly, though nothing allowed them to. He saw by knowing, by memory that had not yet happened. The walls were smooth, lined with seams of old ivory and veins of quartz that blinked like eyes shut for centuries. He did not touch them. He did not speak. Words had weight here, and even breath was a form of trespass. Far below, deeper than reason allowed, he came upon the chamber of bones. It was vast, circular, and steeped in silence so complete it seemed to hold gravity. Skulls lined every surface, some bleached, some blackened, all staring. They watched him with sockets too wide, too knowing. The floor was not stone but compacted ash, sifted fine as flour and thick with the scent of time. At the center sat the remains of Ursa. She was not corpse, not ghost, but an echo made solid. Bones wrapped in moss and root, long hair curled around her like a shroud spun from night. Her skull was split down the center, clean and precise, and where her mouth should have been, something moved, teeth that whispered without lips, sound without voice. Her hands were folded over her lap, fingers gnarled like branches that had dreamed of fire but never burned. Kjell approached and the cave responded, a low moan deep in the marrow of the mountain, as though the stone itself remembered pain. Ursa stirred. Not with movement, but with presence. Her jaw opened, impossibly wide, creaking like the opening of a sealed tomb. No breath issued from her, only a sound, a chorus of voices, layered and overlapping, as if every woman who had ever spoken had loaned her tongue to the dead seer. "You come as breathless shadow," she said. "You wear sleep like armor, and fate like blood." Kjell bowed his head. "I come for truth." "No," she replied. "You come for certainty." The blade at his back trembled. Not in fear. In hunger. Ursa's skull tilted. "You carry the blade of dream. Born not of metal, but of memory. It has drunk from the eye of the veil. And it is not yet full. I would close the wound," Kjell said. "I would seal the last breach." "No," she said again. "You would end it. But the wound cannot be closed. It is not yours to mend. You are not a healer. You are a knife." Kjell clenched his fists. "Then why lead me here?" "Because I am the last voice of the first question," she whispered. "And you must hear it before you forget your name." Silence fell again. And then the bones began to speak. Not just Ursa's, but all of them. The walls. The floor. The ceiling. Each skull moaned a single phrase, again and again, layered in chaos and rhythm. A chant of the forgotten. A song with no melody. Words that should never have been learned. "What are you when your dream dies?" The question hit him like flame. His knees buckled. He collapsed onto the ash, breath stolen from his lungs. The runes on his arms dimmed to nothing. The thread on his wrist went still. The blade clattered from his back, landing with a dull thud. He stared at the bones. They stared back. "What are you when your dream dies?" He thought of the skald's tale by the dying fire. He thought of the mountain. The hound. The woman in the sea. Sigvard's crown. Birds thread. The seal breaking. The sky unmaking. What are you when your dream dies? Kiel opened his mouth, and remembered. He remembered the day his name was cut from the village rolls. The moment he walked into the wild not as a man, but as a wound. He remembered the first night he dreamed not of home, but of silence. He remembered the sleep that took him, not gently, but like drowning. And he saw then. He had never sought power. He had sought stillness. Peace. Not glory. Only quiet. Because his dream had already died. Long ago. When the world looked away and let it. He rose. The skulls fell silent. Ursa leaned forward. You have remembered what cannot be carried. Kiel lifted the blade. Its runes pulsed again. Slow. Measured. Alive. Ursa's voice faded into a rasp. Then you are ready. For what? He asked. To give sleep to the one who dreams. She collapsed then. Bones falling inward. Dust blooming outward. The cave shuddered. The path behind him vanished. Only the way forward remained. Kiel turned toward the dark. And walked into it. The earth quaked in slow, terrible waves, as though the roots of the world had begun to shift in their slumber. Kiel emerged from the cave of Ursa with the scent of dust still in his lungs, the silence of the bone seer ringing in his ears like a final bell. The air outside had thickened, not with fog but with dream, raw and tangible. Trees bowed beneath its weight. Stones groaned. The sky above was no longer a ceiling, but a vast, trembling canvas of shifting light and shadow, painted with clouds that moved like thoughts and stars that blinked in time with breath not his own. The thread around his wrist was cold now. Urd's bargain had passed into the realm of inevitability. The blade across his back was warm again. Too warm. It whispered not with words, but with need. He followed the tremors northward. The land had changed. The ridges he once crossed had folded inward, paths gone strange and recursive. Rivers curved against gravity, their waters thick with ink. The snow had melted into a glistening sheen that reflected not his face, but glimpses of others, old friends, enemies, himself as a boy, himself as a king, himself broken and buried. He did not flinch at them. They were lies, but lies that remembered truth. Every step he took pressed against the veil like a thumb into wax. The border between waking and sleep had thinned beyond repair. And then he heard it. A breath. So vast and deep it moved the sky. He climbed a ridge of shattered stone and saw the crater below. It stretched for miles, a depression in the earth not formed by explosion but by weight, by the mass of something that had lain there for uncounted eons. At its center, coiled in sleep, was the Jotun. Its form was not fully knowable. The eye could trace only pieces of it at a time. A shoulder like a glacier's edge, arms wrapped around a chest that rose and fell like the tides. Its skin was not flesh but something older, darker, stone and star, root and bone. A face rested atop the form, eyes closed, mouth slightly open. From its breath, clouds were born. From its dreams, the world trembled. Runes larger than towers pulsed across its limbs, ancient and shifting, as if written in the language of time itself. Kiel stood at the rim of that ancient bed and knew what he saw. The first dreamer. The source of the veil. The one whose mind had spilled into the world before the gods had names. He descended slowly, each step heavy with purpose. The closer he came, the harder it was to think. Memories slipped from him like sand through fingers. His name thinned in his throat. He forgot his father's face. He forgot the taste of fire. Only the blade remembered, its edge now humming with hunger so deep it hurt. He came to the base of the dreamer's form and stood beside its hand, a hand wide as a longhouse, curled slightly in sleep. In its palm, trees had grown. In its shadow, nothing dared stir. Then it moved. A finger twitched. Not much. Just enough. The sky darkened further. A tremor surged through the ground, and the runes on the giant's skin flared bright gold, then sank into blood red. The air shimmered, and the veil between realms tore further. From the rents poured shapes, half seen, flickering like torchlight reflected in ice. beasts born from thought, wolves with too many eyes, serpents that spoke in riddles, children whose mouths opened to reveal endless stairwells, dreams made flesh, or nightmares made real. They stumbled across the crater in lurching arcs, spreading into the world, feeding on fear, on silence, on things unspoken. Kiel stepped forward. The blade rose in his hand. The runes along its edge burned white now. It had drunk deeply of sleep and silence and prophecy. It was ready. But he was not. The giant exhaled again. And Kiel fell to one knee, his thoughts unraveling. He saw himself walking into the sea. He saw himself blind, begging in a ruined village. He saw himself crowned in black iron, alone atop a throne of sleep. Each vision struck him like a blow, staggering the mind more than the body. The blade nearly slipped from his grasp. Then, faint and distant, a voice. Not from the sky. From within. Remember what you are when the dream dies. Ursa's final gift. He stood. He placed the blade's point to the earth and whispered words that did not come from language, but from knowing. The blade pulsed. And the world shifted. Light poured from the runes, forming a ring around the Jotun's form. The creatures spawned from its dream shrieked and dissolved into smoke. The ground stilled. The sky recoiled. The giant stirred, its head turning slightly toward him, eyes still closed, yet now furrowing in some unknown thought. The spell was not to kill it. It could not be killed. The spell was to lull it, to bind it back into slumber. But it required a sacrifice. Kiel reached to his wrist and unbound the thread. It pulsed once, then burned. The ravens came, not from the sky, but from behind his heart. They burst from him in a storm of black wings, circling the giant's head, cawing in a rhythm that matched the runes. Each cry was a lullaby of the old world. Each flap of wing a verse and a song meant only for sleep. The Jotun groaned. Its body relaxed. Its fingers curled inward once more. The light dimmed. The breach began to close. Kiel sank to the ground, spent, vision dimming. He looked down at his hands and saw them fading, not in color, but in certainty, becoming more dream than flesh. He smiled. For he knew now. He would become the watcher of the veil. His breath, his last breath, already promised, would hold the boundary. And the dreamer would sleep again. Night clung to the world like a second skin, heavy and without edge, a darkness that had forgotten the shape of stars. The sky above the crater no longer turned, no longer blinked with the eyes of gods or ghosts. It was a still thing now, a vast, silent lid lowered upon the earth. And beneath it, the breath of the Jotun slowed, deep and distant, like the tide receding from a ruined shore. Kiel knelt beside the blade he had driven into the earth, his hands resting on his thighs, palms bloodless, skin pale as snow left too long beneath moonlight. The ring of light encircling the sleeper had faded, but the scent of smoke and ancient sap still lingered in the air, the last traces of a spell that had not bound, but soothed. The veil between worlds was closing. He felt it with every breath, thinner, fainter, less like a wound and more like a scar that time would never fully erase. The runes carved into his flesh no longer burned. They glowed faintly now, soft and blue, like embers drifting underwater. But the stillness within him was not peace. It was the quiet that comes after a scream. Behind him, the land had changed. The sea of mirrors had vanished, its surface shattered and swallowed by the earth. The longship was gone. The fjord where blood once stained the snow had turned to mist. All paths now circled back to this place, as if the world itself had curled inward like a dying hand. Nothing moved. No raven called. Even the wind refused to stir. But something remained. A choice. It whispered to him not with voice, but with presence coiling around his heart like the last breath of a sleeping god. He turned his gaze inward, where silence curled around his memories like frost upon glass. Faces emerged in the stillness, his mother, her eyes soft and sorrowful, his father, cloaked in the cold weight of prophecy, the skald, speaking riddles to dying embers, Urd, with her raven feather cloak and voice made of storm. And then he saw it, the choice. It stood before him, wearing no shape, no color, only the tension of two truths. The dream had been lulled, not slain. The veil stitched, not sealed. The sleeper would rest, but only so long as balance held. The war sleep, the rune blade, the songs carved into bone, these had staved off the flood, but not forever. The breach demanded a final toll. To preserve what remained, something of himself must be left behind. And not a piece. A root. He could give up his name. Unmake it. Let the world forget it. Let history flow around it like a stone cast into a stream. His path would vanish, unspoken, unremembered, but the veil would remain firm. The sleepers would not stir. Or he could offer his past. Let it remain. Let his deeds be known. Let the songs be sung. But in return, he would be hollow. A vessel. The price would be presence. He would walk forward in the world, blade still in hand, a sentinel to the breach, but no longer Kiel. He would forget all he had been. 2 sacrifices. 2 selves. Only one could walk away. The silence deepened. And then, from the rim of the crater, the hound appeared. Its coat was darker than shadow, its eyes twin coals dimmed to embers. It padded forward without sound, circled once, and lay beside him, head resting on its paws. It had not come to guide him this time. It had come to wait. Kiel lowered his gaze. He remembered the howl beneath the aurora, the mountain of smoke and root, the pool of shadow that swallowed his name, the seer who whispered without lips, the skulls that screamed the question, "What are you when your dream dies?" He rose. The blade in the earth quivered. He placed his palm on its hilt, felt its hum, now slow and steady, like the breathing of a child. It did not want blood. It did not want glory. It wanted only truth. He drew it free. The sky did not crack. The world did not shake. But the choice stood firm before him. And Kiel chose. He whispered his name. Once. Only once. Then let it go. The runes upon his arms faded. The thread around his wrist turned to ash. The blade, once burdened by 100 dreams, sang once, high and clear. The hound lifted its head and howled, the sound long and low, echoing not through forest or field, but through time. And the dream held. Kiel, now nameless, turned from the crater. The Jotun stirred once more, a deep breath drawn, then settled. And the world exhaled with it. The veil remained, thin but whole. And the one who had walked the war sleep walked now into a future unrecorded, unknown, but held in silence. Above the world, only one eye watched. Pale, cold, and distant, it hung where the sun once ruled, casting no warmth and offering no time. It blinked once, slowly, deliberately, and the sky remained unchanged. There was no dawn, no dusk. The light that spilled over the land was neither silver nor gold, but a dull, ashen glow that softened no edge and warmed no skin. Beneath that gaze, the earth had grown quiet. The wind, once a creature of motion and voice, had stilled. Rivers moved in silence. Trees, stripped of leaf and color, leaned inward toward one another as though conferring, sharing what only trees could remember, the long ache of centuries and the taste of change. And the crater, where the dreamer lay, had begun to seal itself, slowly filling with snow that did not fall, only appeared, as if placed by unseen hands. Kiel stood at the edge of it. Or the man who had been Kiel. He bore the same height, the same hands, the same eyes, but there was nothing behind them now that bore a name. The runes on his arms were faded, not erased but silenced, their purpose fulfilled. The thread once bound around his wrist was gone, and though no mark remained, he could still feel the memory of its weight. The blade, forged from sleep and blood and memory, was still with him. It hung at his side, its edge dull, its runes asleep. It did not speak anymore. It did not need to. The final dream had ended. He walked away from the place slowly, each step sinking slightly into the new snow that whispered as it compressed. Behind him, there were no footprints. Nothing followed. The hound had gone. The sky had stilled. And the silence, greater than any he had known, spread outward from the crater like a breath finally released. He moved north, not because he knew the way, but because there were no roads left, no markers to heed, only instinct. The world around him was a half-light landscape of ruin and rest. The great trees of the ancient woods had ceased their groaning. The mountains in the far distance sat hunched like slumbering giants, their peaks smoothed by a new, unnatural quiet. Villages he passed were not broken, merely still, hearths grown cold, doors unlatched, tools left mid-task. No signs of struggle. No corpses. Only absence. As if their inhabitants had walked into sleep and not returned. He came upon one such village at the base of a black ridge, its houses curved like ribs around a central fire pit. Snow clung to the roofs but not the ground. In the silence, the empty thresholds breathed. He entered the long hall, his shadow stretching before him like a warning. Inside, the hearth was cold, but the ash within it was warm. Shapes sat along the benches, shapes of people, unmoving, caught between thought and sleep. Their eyes were closed, their bodies upright, their hands resting on knees or folded over bellies. One child held a doll. An old man clutched a spoon. A woman sat staring down at a bowl of melted broth. Not dead. Not awake. Held. Dreaming. He did not speak. There was no one to hear. The veil held now, thin but whole. The sleepers would sleep. The dreamer would dream. And the world would continue, not as it had, but in a way shaped by that final choice. For the dream had not been vanquished. Only quieted. Kiel had not slain the nightmare. He had become its watcher. Its threshold. The breath promised to Erd would be spent in the far-off future, at the moment when the veil trembled again and asked once more whether the world was worth the dream. Until then, he would walk. No longer bound by past or name, or even time. Outside the hall, the sky began to lighten. Not with sun, but with shimmer. The single eye blinked again, and from it fell a single flake of light, soft and slow, spiraling down through cloud and air and silence. It landed on the blade's hilt. It did not melt. It pulsed once, then was gone. He continued north. In the caves of the high cliffs, ravens stirred and flew outward, their wings silent. In the black valleys of Svarthal, the backwards wind ceased its cry. In the sea of mirrors, now broken and frozen, the images of alternate selves vanished, leaving only ice. The long ship drifted once more across the tide, its crew seated, dreaming, untroubled by storm or time. And far beneath the earth, deep in the roots of stone, the Jotun shifted once more and slept deeper. Somewhere, in a place no longer reachable, Erd stood at the edge of the well and watched with her hollow eyes. She held the final breath in one hand, wrapped in a thread of nothing. She said no word. She did not smile. She simply nodded once, slow, solemn, inevitable. In time, bards would sing of a warrior who walked beyond sleep, who wrestled fate in silence, who bore no name but carried memory like a sword. The stories would twist, as all stories do. Some would say he died, others that he never was. But all would whisper of the moment the veil held. And all would agree, it cost more than blood. Kiel, no longer Kiel, passed from hill to hill, unseen. He did not dream anymore. He did not sleep. But the world did. And it was enough.